Everyone, and happy Easter to each of you. We hope that you will have an enjoyable time together with family and celebration this weekend. This morning I want to dig right into this. I want to talk about two different kinds of hope that we can have. There's the hope that we have for something, and then there's a hope that we can have in someone. So two different kinds of hope. Hoping for something and hoping in someone. When we have hope for something, we're looking for something to occur, some event, some outcome, something that's going to be in our favor. So we're hoping that, we'll get that job, or we're hoping that we'll get that house, or we're hoping that we'll get that girl. Or better yet, we're hoping that we get that girl who gets that job, who buys that house. There's hopes that we can have that are long shots too, like hope that we're going to win the lottery, or hope that the Leafs are going to get the Stanley Cup this year, right? I mean, I've been waiting for it. It's 1967. Hasn't happened yet. There's also a kind of hope that it can be kind of like death in a way, where we're hoping that she comes back, or that he makes it, or that they don't get cancer. And sometimes they do get cancer. Sometimes they don't come back. Sometimes they don't make it. And I want to present to you a harsh reality in all of this, and that is sometimes what we hope for is going to disappoint. In fact, I would say it even stronger. That if we are hoping for something, we will always be disappointed. Because that something that we're hoping for is eventually not going to be there anymore. It's going to disappear, it's going to melt, it's going to no longer be available, it's going to die, something's going to happen, and that thing that we're hoping for eventually is no longer going to be there. And that's disappointing, because it's going to disappoint us. And that's why I think we need to ask a deeper question. And that is, what do you hope in when all the other things are no longer fulfilled? What is their deeper level of hope? What is it that you hope for when all the other things do not come to fruition? What is the foundation hope that you have? And that's the question I want us to dig into even deeper this morning. When you've lost something that you really were hoping for and it doesn't come to fruition, I want to propose to you that you can hope in someone. Hope in someone that will last for all eternity, that will truly give satisfaction and fulfillment in your life. So I want to talk about that someone this morning. And the whole testimony of the Bible is really pointing to this one person, this one man, this one God that we talk about as Jesus Christ. And He has come to fulfill our deepest and foundational hope of our lives. And the big deal about Jesus is not that He is going to provide for something that we are hoping for, because that thing will eventually fade away and disappoint us. But the big deal about Jesus is that He is the someone in whom we can hope in. And that will last for all eternity. I want to start by talking about a kind of an obscure story in the Bible. It's found in the Old Testament, found in 1 Samuel chapter 4 and 5. And unless you've been to church a lot, you might not recognize this story, but it's an important story. And it's about the history of Israel. Now, Israel had just been freed from slavery in Egypt for hundreds of years, and they already have crossed over. They've wandered in the wilderness for 40 years, and they're now in the promised land, but they're really struggling because they're facing their enemies, and one of their enemies that they're facing is the Philistines. And they're battling against the Philistines, and they go to war with them, and they lose big time. 4,000 soldiers die in this battle. And of course, the Israelites, they complain and say, "Oh God, why did you allow this to happen? Why weren't you there to help us? Why did you not give us the victory that we so eagerly desired? You brought us into this promised land, and only for this." I mean, this is what we often do when we don't get what we want. We shake our fists at God and say, "God, why didn't you come through? Why did you not give us what we had hoped for? Why did it not come through?" Then someone gets the bright idea. And they think to themselves, well, okay, we lost. All right. Let's go back into battle, but this time let's bring out the secret weapon. Everybody has a secret weapon. Secret weapon for the Israelites was the Ark of the Covenant. I mean, the Ark of the Covenant. I mean, how many have seen Indiana Jones, right? I mean, you know what the Ark of the Covenant is, right? It's a box, but it's not just an ordinary box. This was a box that was in the tabernacle. It was in the temple. And in that box, there were three things. There was Aaron's rod that had sprung, and some sprouts or leaves had come from that rod. There's a jar of manna, the manna representing all the food that God provided for the Israelites while they were in the wilderness for 40 years. And there was also the Ten Commandments. So this represented everything about who God was. God was sovereign. He is powerful. He is the one who has provided for the Israelites. And so in essence, as this box is representing God, it actually has become much more than that. It actually represents God. It is God. It is God in a box. The very presence of God resides in this box. And you put it in the Holy of Holies, and the high priest once a year would enter into the Holy of Holies, because that's where the presence of God is. And so someone said, let's bring God with us to the next battle. I mean, surely there's no doubt that we will win if we bring God in the box with us. There's no chance of defeat because God is with us. And there's no chance, it'd be so remote possibility that this Ark of the Covenant would ever be captured because God is with us. And so, let's bring God into the next battle with us. Wouldn't that be great if we could do that? If we just bring God in a box? And, here's God. And we just say, hey, God, I need this. I really am hoping for this. God, can you just, I'll just snap my fingers and you provide for me, and God in a box, right? Sounds kind of funny, but in a way we do that though, right? We do that. We have a tendency to really expect God to fulfill the wishes and the desires that we have. And if He doesn't follow through, we say, God, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you help me? And we complain about it. But here's the problem. Here's the secret about that. That God does not fit in a box. He just doesn't fit. He's just way too big. He's too unruly. You can't tame God. You can't fit Him into a box. You can't restrict Him. It's just not possible. God does not fit in a box. But that's what the Israelites tried to do. They tried to fit Him in this box, and they tried to force God to give them what they wanted, to what they had hoped for. They go into battle, and guess what? They lose even more significantly. They lost 30,000 soldiers this time, more than 4 times than they did before. It was a disaster. Not only that, but the Ark of the Covenant was captured. The Philistines took it away. I mean, this is tantamount to losing God. I mean, you go into battle, what happened? Well, we lost. What about God? We lost Him. I mean, this is pretty bad. How can you lose God? The God of Israel had been captured. Now, this is where things start to get a little bit interesting. This is where God springs into action, and He's doing something that the Israelites could never do on their own. So the Philistines, they capture this Ark of the Covenant. They all celebrate, they're rejoicing. They bring it to the city of Ashdod. That's where they have their own temple. That's where they have their own god called Dagon. And they have the statue of Dagon, and they place this Ark of the Covenant in front of him, and they celebrate, and they say, our God is bigger than the God of Israelites. God of Dagon is more powerful than Yahweh, the God of the Israelites. And so they celebrate that whole day. They party and they feast and they sing and they dance. And they're so excited. And then they go home to bed for that evening, and something happens during the night. No one gets to see what happens, but in the morning, the priests return to the temple, and it says this, 1 Samuel 5:3. When the people of Ashdod rose early the next day, there was Dagon fallen on his face on the ground before the ark of the Lord. So the text doesn't actually tell us what the priests were thinking about that. I mean, it was a little bit, unsettling. Face forward, down in front of the Ark of the Covenant. It almost looks like he's bowing down before the God of Yahweh. And maybe Yahweh really is the King of Kings, Lord of Lords. Well, it doesn't tell us what they were thinking, but maybe it was just an accident. Maybe all the dancing last night caused some disruption and, got loose or whatever. Something happened, but it doesn't look good. So they dust off their God, they prop him back up, and they party that second day. And they celebrate their great victory. And they dance some more and they drink some more. And it was a great day of celebration. And then the priests turn off the light in the temple and they go home to bed. And I can just imagine Dagon is thinking, okay, here we go again. That very night, something happens again. And the next morning, the priests come in and they find Dagon has fallen on the floor once again. And this time, his head is broken and his hands are broken. And all that's left is a stump of their God. And it was face forward in front of the Ark of the Covenant before Yahweh. And it was frightening for them. This is a 3-day story. Wouldn't it have been great to have seen what had happened, to have been there? The text doesn't tell us everything about it, but here's 3 days. The first day was a very dark day. This was a day in which it looks as if the God of Israel has lost. That there is no God. That there is no glory. God has been defeated. In fact, there's another part to the story that I haven't told you yet, and that is that after they lose the battle and the Ark of the Covenant has been captured, the priest of Israel, Eli, has died. And not only Eli has died, but his 2 sons have died in battle. They were the ones that were looking after the Ark of the Covenant. And one of the priest's wife was actually pregnant. And when she heard about the destruction of Israel and the fact that the Ark of the Covenant was captured and that her husband had been killed and her father-in-law had been killed, she goes into labor. She is so distraught. And she dies in childbirth. But before she dies in childbirth, she gives birth to this son. And she gives the name Ichabod to her son. Now, Ichabod is an interesting name because kabod means glory. That's the Hebrew word for glory. And when you put an I in front of it, it makes it the negative, makes it the opposite. Much like atheist, theist is someone who believes in God. You put an A in front of it, it's somebody who doesn't believe in God. And so this is Ichabod. In other words, there is no glory. And so you know what she's saying? Basically, she's saying, this has all been a sham. This is a complete facade. Abraham was completely off his rocker, following some God conversation about going to this promised land. Moses, he was lunatic, wandering around in the wilderness for 40 years, dreaming up something. There is no God. There is no meaning to life. You live, you die, that's it. That's all there is to it. A lot of people believe that. And so my son may as well know right off the bat, right from the get-go, and she names him Ichabod. There's no glory. There's no God. There's nothing more than what you see in front of your face. It's a dark day. Some days are like that. Heaven is silent. Hope is gone. There's no glory. Second day. Second day was a little bit more different, but it was still very, very dark. There was something going on behind the scenes that we can't always see. A hidden combat. But again, it was a day where there was confusion, there was this mystery and anxiety. Some days are like that too. But this is a third day story. And on the third day, there is this 180-degree turn that happens. And all of a sudden, God appears to come into action. And he defeats the idol that is in front of him. And he falls down face forward and breaks. And God is now going to be returned to his own people, because God is a God of the third day. Now that may sound strange to you, God of the third day, but there's a pattern that we see in the Old Testament that refers to 3 days a lot. 3 days. It's a statement that's saying that the people of Israel are told to wait, and after 3 days they will be delivered. There's going to be a rescue party that happens after 3 days. And we see this in a number of passages. When Joseph was in prison, and he said to Pharaoh's cupbearer, he said, "In 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your job." In 3 days, things are going to be different. When Israel was trapped in slavery, Moses asked Pharaoh, "Let us go 3 days into the wilderness." In 3 days, things will be a lot different from captivity to victory. And when the Israelites arrive at Sinai, God says this, "Consecrate the people and make them ready by the third day, because on that day the Lord will come down." And on the morning of the third day, it came to pass. When Israel was afraid to go into the promised land, God said to Israel, "Don't be afraid, don't be discouraged. 3 days from now, you will cross the Jordan to possess the land the Lord has given you." When Israel was threatened by genocide, Esther was a harem girl, and she said, "I was going to fast for 3 days, and then she will go to the king and ask for deliverance for her people." When Jonah was swallowed by a big fish, anybody guess how many days he was in the belly of that fish? Yes, I know. It's such an obvious answer, but thank you. 3 days. The third day was used so frequently that it became an expression that things are really bad now, things look really dark, things look hopeless, things are chaotic, but in 3 days, things are going to be better. You will see deliverance, you will be rescued. In the book of Hosea, another prophet in the Old Testament, he says this, "Come, let us return to the Lord. After 2 days he will revive us. On the third day he will restore us so that we may live in his presence." Which now brings us back to what we're doing here today, celebrating Easter. God promised that there would be a day that would come when he would deliver his people from oppression, from slavery. But he comes in a way that was unexpected. He doesn't come in a box, but he comes as a man. It says in John chapter 1, John was one of the followers of Jesus, and he says, "The Word became flesh." The Word, referring to the revelation of God. The Word became flesh. And the Bible says it dwelt among us. And when it says it dwelt among us, that's the same word as tabernacle. So it's referring to the presence of God. Remember, in the tabernacle is where the Ark of the Covenant, the presence of God, was in the Holy of Holies, in that Ark. And now we have God and his presence coming in the person of Jesus. And so John says, "And the Word became flesh." God put skin on. He became human and tabernacled among us. His presence was among us. And we beheld his glory, his kabod, his glory, the glory of the one and only who came from the Father. Now the glory, this is kind of a funny glory though, because this is a strange combination of humility, of loneliness, of fearlessness, wrapped up in a human being. But for Jesus, nobody can tame Jesus. Nobody can control him. Nobody could tell Jesus what to do. Nobody could really shut him up. The religious leaders couldn't. The zealots, the scholars of the day. Nobody could coerce him or really set him off. Jesus could not be tamed. And so what they ended up doing was they whipped him and tortured him and hung him on a cross and then threw his dead body into a tomb. That was the first day. The first day was a dark day. His followers were absolutely crushed. They couldn't believe it. They had put all of their hope that they would actually get what they had hoped for, this something that they were hoping for. They were hoping for the deliverance of their people. So they put all their stock that this person was their Messiah, and they were going to give them what they were hoping for. And when they didn't get it, and they saw him die, it just threw them for a loop. And now it's Ichabod. There is no glory. There is no God. The second day didn't look any better. The second day is when Pilate posted a guard at the tomb entrance because a religious leader had said to Pilate, there's this talk about him rising from the dead, so we got to make sure the disciples don't try to take this body and kind of pretend that this has happened. So they put their guard on the tomb, and Pilate says, I'm in charge now. This whole movement is now over. There's nothing more that can happen. They're not going to do anything funny with the body and try to pretend that he has risen from the dead. And so Pilate says, I'm in charge. I don't know much about this Jesus, but we've now put him in this nice little box, and he can rest in peace. But here's the thing. You cannot put God in a box. You can't even, death is not even going to hold him back. They don't know it at this point, but they're soon going to find out. And the Bible tells us that Jesus died for a purpose. It wasn't that he just accidentally died, that he got in this mess and this riot and he got caught up in this terrible thing. No, he voluntarily relinquished his life. He was in total control the whole time. He could have got out of that at any moment, but he voluntarily gave up his life, and he did something that we could never do, and that is to pay for the penalty of our own sins. We try to do that on our own. We try to make it up to God, and we say, okay, well, we'll just be good enough and we'll appease God. We'll just go to church enough. We'll just do good enough things, nice things for other people, and hope that God will recognize that we are a nice person, and therefore we'll be able to have entrance and be in favor with God. But we'll never, ever be able to do enough to satisfy the requirements. Jesus was the only one that could possibly do it. He was the only one that could truly take the punishment for our own sins. And that's what he did. He gave up his life for us. So the second day, that was a dark day. That was a confusing day. A disappointing day. The reality of what had happened, the disciples were still wrestling with. It was a day of confusion and of anxiety. They were wondering what was going to happen next. But remember, this is a 3-day story. So the first day was a dark day. All their hopes and dreams were killed when Jesus died on the cross. The second day, the guard was posted at the tomb where Jesus was placed. That was a real dark day. When Jesus says, it is finished, that's how the disciples took it. It's finished. It's over. There's nothing more. Ichabod. No glory. But this is a 3-day story. And on the third day, we discovered that there is someone in whom we can have hope, which is way better than in having hope for something. Because God is a third-day God. On the third day is a day when the prisoners of Pharaoh were set free. The third day is a day that people come to the mountain, and the mountains shake, and the rivers are parted, and people go into the promised land. The third day is a day when harem girls like Esther face down powerful giant kings. The third day is a day when prophets like Jonah are dropped off at a seaside port by giant fish. The third day is a day that idols like Dagon come tumbling down and God starts coming home to his people. The third day is a day that stones are rolled away, the day when a crucified carpenter comes back to life. God is a God of the third day. And the world has never been the same since. Everything has changed because of God of the third day. That group of frightened disciples that were huddled together on the second day in their anxiety and this chaos and this darkness and this confusion, on that second day they weren't fit to do anything. But on the third day they all of a sudden became a group of fearless, bold, courageous disciples that started the church. And they're willing to go into all over the world to declare the gospel of who Jesus Christ is and that He has died for our sins, at the risk of being crucified, the risk of being slain. And many of them did. Many of them were sacrificed. Many of them were persecuted. But it didn't matter to them because they served a God of the third day, and they had hope in someone rather than something. Which leads us to the natural question on this Easter Sunday, and that is, where do you have your hope? Where is your hope placed? We may hope for something. We may hope that there's going to be healing. We may hope that we get this good thing that happens in our life, our finances or our health or whatever it may be. But when that doesn't come through, and when that passes over, what is the deeper hope that you have? What is the deeper hope that you're placing your ultimate hope in? Thank you, Emily. There's been a journey, right? We're all on a journey, and if we place our hope in things, eventually we will be disappointed, whether it's hope in health or hope in others, hope in people. But ultimately, our hope needs to be in Jesus Christ, our ultimate hope. And so a lot of people put their hope in their job or their marriage or their health or success or security or whatever it may be. But eventually they will let you down. And Jesus' followers would say to us, put your ultimate hope in Jesus Christ. And we can do that. We can do that right now. Even if you've never done that before, you can do that even now. You can simply say to Him that I trust You. I'm placing my life into Your hands. I'm putting my hope in You. And that I can live with You for all eternity. And I accept the gift of salvation that You have offered to me. And if you place your hope in Jesus, that means that there is no power on this earth, no regret, no accident, no mistake, no anything, even death cannot take away that hope that we have in Him. So that day that Jesus died on the cross, He provided salvation for us, and that third day when He rose again, we have victory in Him. We're third day people now because we serve a third day God. Let's pray together. As we're bowing our heads, as we're thinking more reflectively upon this, I want to give you a moment just to have this conversation with God on this Easter Sunday. And maybe you're here this morning because you're just visiting on an Easter Sunday. You haven't been to church very much, and you're just at the very beginning stages of thinking about God and about faith, and you have lots of questions. You don't have enough information, but I want to encourage you to make a decision this morning to say to God something like this: I don't even know if you're out there, but I'm going to make this a priority. I'm going to take this very seriously. And I'm going to take up my Bible, or I'm going to get a Bible. I'm going to go to church more often. I'm going to look for answers to the questions that I have. But I'm going to take this serious. And if that's where you are today, I want to encourage you to make that decision. Maybe some of you already have a good understanding of this story about Jesus' death and resurrection, and how He was raised to this third day God, but you've never clearly, personally responded to Him. And you've been to churches, and you've heard the story, but you've never really put a stake in the ground and said, yes, I'm in. I'm all yours. Today is a good day for you to do that. You can do that. You can talk to God, and you can even do it in your own heart. You can just say something like, I understand, Jesus, what You have done for me, the love that You have given. I recognize that. I confess my sin. I recognize that I've messed up, that I've tried to go my own way. I've hurt others. I've hurt myself, and I've hurt You. So on this Easter day, I ask for forgiveness. And because of what You have done, You've done for me. And I will, from this day forward, follow you as long as I'm alive on this earth. Others of you are here today maybe because you've had a lot of disappointment in your life, in your heart. And maybe there's something there that you're full of worry and fear, and it's really gotten you down, you're depressed. You know what Jesus would say? He says, give it to me. Give me your disappointment, give me your fear, give me your doubts, and I will give you the hope. Put it all on me. I understand all what it means to be in pain and in disappointment and suffering. I was there myself, Jesus says. So God, would you speak hope into every heart here, wherever they are at in their journey with you. God, we declare our deep dependence upon you. Would you one more time be the light that shines in the darkness and that life that is victorious over the grave? Thank you that you are God of the third day. Amen.